Welcome down to the inaugural episode of the Jake Bowtell Football Experience, henceforth to be known as the JBFE. On this section of the internet, I'm hoping to talk all things football of the American variety, from the NFL to college football, and I'd even like to get a little bit of coverage in on the leagues here in Australia, particularly Gridiron, Victoria, as that's the state I live in. So today in episode 1, what I want to touch on is reviewing some of the week 4 action in the NFL, particularly big games between the Patriots and the Bills, the Saints and the Cowboys, and the Vikings at the Bears. We'll touch on a few other results in a smaller way, but those are the 3 main games I want to hit today. Then I'll do a quick wrap-up of the Gridiron Victoria results from the weekend. I think they're up to week 7 there. And then we will call it a video. So to start off with, we'll travel to Orchard Park for the game between the Buffalo Bills and the New England Patriots. This was a divisional game between 2 unbeaten AFC East rivals. The Patriots and the Bills both going into this game 3-0 and sitting equal first in their division. Now, the Bills haven't beaten the Patriots since clocks were invented or something insane like that. This has been such a one-sided rivalry forever. It's a game, and I suppose you could say that about a lot of teams that the Patriots play. They don't lose very often. But this was a chance for the Bills to show to the footballing world that they had improved, that they had made strides, particularly on offense. I think the Bills have had a consistently strong defense the last few years. It's been steadily improving to be one of the better units in the NFL. What we were really looking to see was whether second-year quarterback Josh Allen could step up to the plate against New England in this game and lead that offense against what is a formidable New England defense. New England haven't given up a touchdown on defense since before the Super Bowl last year. And they have just looked consistently dominant against all comers. So this game essentially couldn't have started any worse for the Bills. They threw 2 interceptions in the first quarter. Josh Allen trying to go deep a couple of times and just getting picked off by the New England Patriots secondary. The Bills also had a punt blocked and returned for a touchdown. So the Patriots went up 13-0 in short order. Josh Allen looked nervous as hell in the pocket, and I think uncertain in his decision making. Still, not uncertain so much as he's still a player that is fighting his instincts. His instincts are he's a big athletic guy. He's got a big arm. He can throw it 80 yards. And he's still having a hard time of basically taking what the defense gives him. The Patriots' man coverage was as tight as boa constrictor-like. I said to my partner who was watching the game with me, you couldn't tell at times which player was running the route. Was it the New England Patriot cornerback or defensive back, or was it the Buffalo Bills wide receiver? They were that in sync. It was like the Patriots knew exactly the routes that the Bills were running. So that contributes to making it a difficult day in the office for Josh Allen, because it was hard to get anyone open because the Patriots' man coverage was just so tight. The problem is, though, in previous weeks where Allen has thrown the ball away instead of throwing it into double coverage, today he just launched it into double coverage, and the Patriots made short work of that. So they race up to a 13-0 lead. But thereafter, the Buffalo Bills defense just turns into a group of absolute Goliaths. They forced the Patriots to multiple punts in a row. They intercepted Tom Brady in the end zone. This was as impressive a team defensive effort as you're going to see in the NFL, particularly against a Patriots offense that has been pretty much in sync the first 3 weeks of the season and just stacking points on all the teams that they've played. The Bills really came out on defense and just shut Tom Brady down. He ended up with 18 completions out of 39 throws, only 150 yards, didn't throw a touchdown, and threw an interception in the end zone. And while they didn't get a sack on Brady, and obviously any quarterback is going to suffer if you can get pressure to him, you know, it's the first time this season that I've really seen a team get through that Patriots offensive line or push them in on Brady. And there were a few times where, although they didn't sack him, they had a rusher get through free in the backfield and force Brady to throw the ball into the ground, throw the ball away. So the Bills defense could not have done any more to keep this game close, to shut the Patriots down. And if moving forward, this is what we're going to see week in, week out from the Bills defense, which the evidence so far suggests that is what we're going to see. They're going to be a very hard team to beat. The problem for the Bills is on the offensive side of the ball. I'm a huge Josh Allen fan. He's an exciting player to watch, whether it's taking off with his legs, throwing the ball, as I say, downfield. He can throw it a country mile. The problem, though, is that he's going to need to make better decisions in the NFL. They've gone out and got him a nice collection of wide receivers this season. Guys like Cole Beasley coming in from the Dallas Cowboys. You know, he was an excellent addition for this team. Just to give Allen someone who we can unload to in space, you know, off those short crosses and slants. Beasley had 7 receptions today for 75 yards off 13 targets. John Brown had 5 catches for 69 yards. TJ Yeldon, 4 catches for 68. And Dawson Knox, who's had an impressive couple of weeks, had 3 receptions off 3 targets, mind you, for 58 yards. So there's a really strong receiving core, or at least a stronger receiving core than Allen had to play with last year, forming at the Bills. But they need to work on some of those softer skills with Allen. The ball comes out of his hand at 150 miles per hour, whether he's throwing 5 yards or whether he's throwing 50. And whether they can change that at this point, I don't know. I mean, you're only talking about a player who's in their early 20s. You would think that it is possible to rein some of that in, to teach him a little bit of touch. But how much of that is just instinct and ingrained and inbuilt already, and how much of it can actually be developed, I guess remains to be seen. And again, you're fighting a thought process that I have to play like Superman. I have to make a play. I have to force the ball downfield. The reality is your defense is doing so well at shutting the Patriots down play after play after play that when you throw 3 interceptions, it just makes your team work even harder. Sometimes it's all right to take a punt. Sometimes it's all right to put the ball back to the opposition, especially when your defense is doing such a mammoth job of shutting them down. And particularly those first quarter interceptions. That first quarter where the Patriots raced away to be 13-0, I mean, that set up the rest of the game. Thereafter, the Bills outscored the Patriots 10-3. So that first quarter was really the crux of it, and that's where Allen probably looked his worst. And I think, obviously, he began to lead a comeback thereafter in the second half of the game. He was intercepted one more time, but he actually started to look like he was gaining momentum, as did the whole Bills offense, until he was knocked out in the, I believe it was at the start of the fourth quarter. running for a first down. He copped a helmet-to-helmet hit. I'm not sure how the player wasn't ejected. I thought that the NFL was making a point of cracking down on these sorts of things, those helmet-to-helmet collisions. It's really interesting how different quarterbacks get treated. I think there's a number of quarterbacks around the league that if they took that helmet-to-helmet hit, then the other player would have been ejected. One of the confusing elements was I think there was a holding penalty on the Bills at the same time. So the penalties actually offset each other, and the Bills didn't even get any yardage after Allen was hit. So I understand that's a bit of a technicality, but I just don't know that that hit should go unpunished. It's really interesting. Having watched a few games across this weekend, it's really interesting to look at the way different quarterbacks are treated. You had in the New Orleans Saints game where Dak Prescott running for a first down, a player, essentially Von Bell, sees him coming, sees him sliding, tries to jump over the top of him to avoid him, and sort of just grazes his jersey almost. And he gets a roughing the passer or unnecessary roughness penalty called against him. Near the end of that game, Teddy Bridgewater takes off, slides early, and the Dallas Cowboys player, basically in doing the same sort of thing, trying to avoid Bridgewater, but still collects him in the helmet as he goes over the top of him. No penalty is called. And I believe the Saints had to punt. I can't remember if it was a punt or they kicked a field goal after that. But it's really hard for fans to watch some of these calls and sort of go, why aren't these being called equally? And I know that that is the fan experience, particularly when it comes to refereeing and officiating, that it always seems to be an uneven playing field. There often seems to be calls made for one team that aren't for the other. And look, it probably does even out across the course of a season. But the hit on Josh Allen that essentially knocked him out of the game, I don't know how that Patriots defensive player then gets to continue his game. There's a similar thing that happened at the start of the Green Bay Packers-Philadelphia game when Jamal Adams was hit out with a helmet-to-helmet collision early on by a Philadelphia Eagles player. It was entirely unnecessary. I think the play had actually been flagged, whistled dead just before the Eagles player went helmet-to-helmet with Jamal Adams. That knocked Adams out of the game. It's something that I wish could be clearer, but it's not, and maybe that's just the reality we live in. But at the point at where Allen was knocked out of the game, he was just sort of catching fire. He had taken off for that run. It looked like he was ready to really shoulder the burden, like he did against the Jets. You know, he really took off in that first week against the Jets and led a comeback for the Bills. It's sort of developing as a bit of a tendency for Allen that he plays a pretty horrible first half and then suddenly comes alight in the second. And he seems like that sort of player that when he gets hot, he gets really hot. He's able to do incredible Herculean things on the field to elevate his team. It's a shame we didn't get the chance to see what would have happened in that final quarter with Allen leading the charge. He may have been intercepted 3 or 4 times. Who knows? But it certainly felt like the tide was shifting at that point. As it was, the Patriots hold on. They win 16-10 in Orchard Park. I think it's an impressive win for the Patriots, even though a lot of people might not feel like it is. The Patriots were able to win without Tom Brady doing Tom Brady things. This is one of the marks, I guess, of them as a great team. The mark of great teams is that they're able to find different ways to win, and that's what they did today, scoring touchdown off that punt return, that blocked punt. They're just able to get players out of special teams. They're able to lean on their defense to shut down the opposition. This doesn't really tell us anything that we didn't already know about the Patriots. They are far and away the hardest team in the NFL to beat. They have such a distinct coaching advantage, I think, over most of the NFL. And they're going to be really hard to stop. I don't think we learned anything new from this game. That is what they are. They are a colossus. They will probably roll on into playoffs, likely roll on into the AFC Championship game, likely roll on into the Super Bowl. It seems something of an inevitability at this point. I know some people will point to Brady's performance and say, well, look how much he's down in production. This happens. You know, your quarterback's going to have days like this. It was an exceptional defensive effort by the Bills. And the great thing for the Patriots is they're able to lean on other elements of their team. For the Bills now, you've got to see whether you get Josh Allen back next week or whether Matt Barkley is going to start. Barkley was not too bad coming in relief. He had 9 completions of 16, 127 yards. He moved the ball pretty effectively. He's a somewhat safer option than Josh Allen, but you don't get that run out of him that Allen can provide. It's actually something I was surprised that the Bills didn't do more of, was more runs with Allen. Maybe because they were worried about him getting knocked out. But I think that's a dynamic that can really shake up the offense when you can run or pass the ball with your quarterback. You're not going to get that out of Barkley. He's just a consistent backup. With this defense, maybe that's enough to win a couple of games if Allen has to sit for a week or two. He's currently in the concussion protocol, and we don't know whether he'll play next week or whether he'll have to sit out. But that's the New England Patriots at the Buffalo Bills. A 16-10 win to the Patriots, who go 4-0, clear at the top of their division, and the Bills 3-1. And I believe on to play the Titans next week for the Bills, and the Patriots are to play the Redskins. So the next game that I want to focus on that I watched was the Minnesota Vikings at the Chicago Bears. This was a big divisional game as well, big head-to-head matchup, a real slugfest between two teams locked at 2-1 within the NFC North. I thought before this game that the keys would come down to the Chicago Bears being able to shut down Dalvin Cook, who has rushed for over 150 yards, I believe, in each of his first 3 weeks this season for the Vikings. And whether or not Mitch Trubisky could take care of the football for the Bears. Both of those things happened, one in sort of the way you might expect, the other in an unexpected way. So essentially at the start of this game, Mitch Trubisky is tackled, rolled on the ground. His, I believe it was his left shoulder, sort of looks like it gets stretched out in a really painful way. He goes off the field a few plays into the game, goes straight into the medical tent, then down the race, and reemerges, 5-10 minutes later with his arm in a sling, out for the rest of the game. So Chase Daniel enters the game for the Bears. Now, at the risk of sounding incredibly harsh, I actually said at the time, I feel like Chicago's chances of winning this game actually may have just improved. Now, Chase Daniel is a backup in the NFL for a reason. He doesn't have that elite level potential that someone like, when you've seen Mitch Trubisky play well, he can make incredible plays with his legs. He has an incredibly strong arm. Maybe not incredibly strong, but he has a stronger arm probably than Chase Daniel. However, this Bears team, I'm more and more convinced that they don't need an elite quarterback to get the job done. They need someone who can complete most of their passes, who can move the chains for them, who can control the offense, manage the clock, look after things, look after the ball. That's what they really need, in my opinion. Because this defense is just talk about the monsters of the midway. They are an unbelievable unit. At times today, watching Kirk Cousins, it was like watching a horror movie. You're going, no, no, get out, get out, because Khalil Mack and just this roving band of just beasts on that defense for Chicago. It was like a horror movie. This Bears defense is just unbelievable. I just can't get over how good they are, how terrifying it is to watch them just blow up offensive lines. But getting back to the quarterback situation for the Bears, just needing someone to manage things, look after the ball, and be consistent. That's basically what Chase Daniel came in and did. He was 22 of 30 for 195 yards, a touchdown, no interceptions. He was sacked once. That's all you need for this Bears team. You don't need a guy to throw 4 touchdowns in a game. You don't need a guy to throw for 350 yards. Because your defense is going to cripple and maim most of the other team's offenses that you're going to play. And you sort of see a bit of a blueprint for Trubisky to follow. If he looks at what Chase Daniel does, he takes care of the football. He makes smart decisions and just manages the team. He manages the offense. He uses the weapons around him. This doesn't need to be any sort of explosive offense. He used Allen Robinson, 7 catches for 77 yards. Javon Wims, 56 yards off 4 catches. Hooked up a couple of times with Trey Burton as well. This wasn't an enormous passing game from the Bears, but it was just what they needed. About 200 yards, a high completion percentage, no interceptions, no fumbles, that sort of thing. That's all they need. They just need consistency on offense. They just need their offense to be good. Because now when we flip over and look at this defense, the defense is elite. In terms of a pass rush, it's kind of obvious to say there may not be another pass rush in the NFL as good as what the Chicago Bears have. They are monstrous. They are the monsters of the midway. They sacked Kirk Cousins 6 times for a loss of 51 yards. They just caused havoc in the Vikings' backfield. You had the sack count, as I say, 6 times they sacked Cousins. And it's not just Khalil Mack. Khalil Mack did have 1.5 sacks, but he also had 1.5 out of Roy Robertson Harris. You had 2 sacks out of Nick Williams, 1 out of Nick Kwiatkowski. They're just coming from everywhere. It's not just one person. And obviously, Khalil Mack's going to draw a lot of that extra attention and create opportunities for other guys. But even when you double team Khalil Mack, he still sometimes finds a way of getting through. In tipping this game, I leaned backwards and forwards, and eventually I just bet on the Bears defense. I said I felt that they were strong enough to, no matter what their offense did, they could find a way to win. I'm glad I did. Look, the Vikings certainly didn't do a horrible job on defense themselves. They only managed to sack Chase Daniel once, for a loss of 7 yards. And the Vikings have a really strong defense without being the Bears. And I mean, so few teams are the Bears level of elite at the moment. But look, the Vikings certainly held their own enough on defense. But this scoreline, it was eventually a 16-6 win for the Bears. But this game was 16-0 going into the last quarter. And 16-6 is exceptionally flattering to the Minnesota Vikings. They had a couple of long drives late, sort of in junk time when the result looked beyond doubt. I mean, when they score that touchdown late and they're going for a 2-point conversion to try and make it 16-8, it almost felt unfair. The fact that the Bears' defense could dominate so heavily, and yet, this would still be a one-score game if the Vikings could put up that 8 points. But really, it never felt close. It never really truly felt like the Vikings could pull off this win because the Bears just absolutely throttled them. Kirk Cousins' numbers end up looking reasonable, 27 of 36 for 233 yards. But really, as I say, that a lot of that came on a long, late drive. If they don't get that drive at the end of the game, his numbers look a lot worse. The Vikings' offensive numbers look a lot worse. And I really think the scoreline did flatter them. And I guess that's a product of the Bears not having an offense that's going to put up 25, 30 points. If this offense was a little more efficient, a little more explosive, then it would be unfair because to have a defense that good and an offense that would be that good. This is kind of the result you're going to get. You're going to get wins that look a lot closer than they actually are because I just never felt that the Vikings were in this game. The Bears just the defense, as I say, the best way you can describe it is they just throttled Kirk Cousins. They stopped Dalvin Cook at the line. He was limited to 14 carries and 35 yards. I would hazard a guess to say that's at least 100 yards less than what he's made in any other game this season. His longest rush was 9 yards. He did get a touchdown in the end, rushing. But the two things that the Bears needed to do to win this game, they did. They took care of the ball. It wasn't Mitch Trubisky that took care of the ball. It was Chase Daniel. And as I say, that's a blueprint for Trubisky on how to look after the football. That's what this Bears team needs to do. They can't afford to have turnovers. And they need someone who's going to make smart decisions in the passing game. And then the second part of getting this win was shutting down Dalvin Cook. And that's what they absolutely did. They really stuffed him at the line. And he just had no impact on the game. And he was their home run hitter, really. That's what the Vikings needed. Kirk Cousins was never going to throw them out of this game. And they needed Dalvin Cook, and the Bears shut him down. A bit of an honourable mention to Stephon Diggs, who had 7 receptions for 108 yards. He was a massive weapon, as usual, in the passing game for the Vikings. Just a couple of other quick things. I know I keep going on and on and on with it. But this Bears defense, it wasn't only in their pass rush either. There was some coverage plays that were absolutely brilliant. Getting across to get a hand in front of a pass to stop a receiver making a catch. It was as impressive a defensive effort. We saw 2 on Sunday in the Bills and the Bears, and you could include the Patriots in that too, obviously. There's 3 incredible defensive efforts in these first 2 games. And the Bears walk away 16-6 victors. They move to 3-1. The Vikings now sit at 2-2. It's an important divisional win for the Bears and puts them level with the Green Bay Packers at 3-1. Just looking ahead to the fixture next week for the Bears and the Vikings. The Bears travel to London to take on the Raiders. I see this as something... There's the potential of this being a danger game for the Bears. You're traveling overseas to play a game against a Raiders team that are just kind of annoying. They're going to hang around. They're going to... I don't know. The Bears might just go in, pound them 21-3 and come home. I don't know. I just get this feeling that something weird could happen in this game. But we'll wait and see. Khalil Mack might have a thing or two to say to his former team who traded him away last year. But we'll see. The Vikings travel to the Giants. You would expect the Giants to get right next week and move to 3-2. Daniel Jones did some good things again this week. I haven't actually watched his game, but just looking at his stat line, he threw some interceptions this week. It wasn't as flawless as a performance as in week 3 when he debuted. I think the Vikings should get that game done next week, but I don't know. The Giants are maybe a little bit frisky at the moment, so we'll see what happens there. Another point to think about too with that Bears game is how long Mitch Trubisky is going to be out. How long are the Bears going to have to ride with Chase Daniel? As I say, I think if Chase Daniel can just do what he did today and not turn the ball over, be safe with possession, then the Bears will be okay. I think they can lean. It's a little bit like the Saints situation. You can lean on the other elements of your team to get a win, provided that your backup quarterback can take care of the football. And for all intents and purposes, that's what Chase Daniel did today. So it'll be interesting. But I'm not sure yet how long Trubisky's out. As I say, he was in a sling. I imagine it's going to be at least a week or so, if not longer. But we'll wait and see. So the third game that I took in yesterday was not a divisional matchup, but it was a within conference matchup between the Dallas Cowboys and the New Orleans Saints at the Superdome in New Orleans. Massive game. The Cowboys beat the Saints last season down in Dallas, and this was an important game for a number of reasons. Obviously, the New Orleans Saints currently playing without Drew Brees, who's been out with that thumb injury. He's had surgery on it, looking to be back within 6 weeks. Was sort of the numbers that have been floated. So at the moment, the Saints rolling with Teddy Bridgewater, their backup quarterback. And last week went into Seattle and secured an amazing win. I can't remember the exact score, but it was within 1 touchdown, the result in the end. And that was flattering on the Seahawks. There were times where the Saints were up by as much as sort of 14, 21 points. And eventually the Seahawks sort of pinned it back a bit at the end. But the Saints were really impressive in finding a different way to win. And it's been interesting. I think Sean Payton is the kind of coach for New Orleans who is enjoying the challenge. He seems like the sort of guy who likes to feel like the smartest guy in the room. And he's certainly done his reputation no harm at all in these 2 weeks without Breeze. So they go in and beat Seattle in Seattle last week with Bridgewater, utilizing their weapons like Kamara, Michael Thomas, leaning on their defense, which did a great job making plays, forcing fumbles, and special teams as well. And they basically followed the same blueprint going into this week 4 matchup against the Cowboys. So the Cowboys coming in 3-0, the Saints 2-1. Important game from the perspective that whoever won this would have the head-to-head tiebreaker down the road in determining who gets to play who where in playoffs. And I'm assuming both of these teams are going to make playoffs and probably win their divisions. So the Saints come in and they secure a massive win. 12-10 in the end. There was 1 touchdown scored in this game by Dallas in the third quarter. Apart from that, we've had all field goals. The Saints, there was a stat floated on the TV when I was watching it saying the Saints hadn't won a game without scoring a touchdown since 1998 or something like that. Don't quote me on that, but it was something like that. It had been a while. So 4 field goals for the Saints in this game, and they just played exceptionally. So it was Will Lutz who nailed 4 of 4 field goals. And again, what was really impressive about the Saints was their ability to find different ways to win. This is a Dallas team that has been spoken about a lot in terms of this new offense they're running under Kellen Moore. Dak Prescott has looked better than he ever has. And look, he still looked pretty good last night in New Orleans. But the Saints found ways to stop the things that Dallas did that were most threatening to them. Ezekiel Elliott, for instance, 18 carries, 35 yards, 1.9 on average. That is a huge win right off the bat for the Saints. If you could say before the game you'll hold Zeke Elliott to 35 yards off 18 carries, the Saints would have taken that in a heartbeat. And they go and they produce that. And that puts the pressure back on the receiving game for the Cowboys. And what the Saints did really well, as they did last week in Seattle, was swarm to the man with the ball. There were very few times where you found Dallas Cowboys catching the ball and having time to make yards after the catch. The Saints swarmed to them. They shut them down quickly. They wrapped them up. They got them to the ground. They tried as much as possible to limit those yards after the catch. I thought that there were a couple of ebbs and flows. It was a real momentum game. You could feel that push and pull, that real arm wrestle. In the third quarter, there was a moment where you sort of felt that Dallas were going to come out and roll in this second half. In fact, I think it was off their first possession of the second half. They rolled right down the field and scored a touchdown, if my memory serves me correctly. And it just had that feeling of, all right, they've gone to halftime, they've made their adjustments, now they're going to come out and punch the Saints in the mouth. But after that touchdown, things really changed. The Saints stuck to the task. They continued to just move the ball as they could with Teddy Bridgewater down the field, kick their field goals, and then rely on their defense to just make plays, to stop guys, to cover hard. There was some brilliant coverage. Again, all three games that I watched yesterday just had some amazing defensive efforts. In fact, the top score was 16. That's the highest score I watched yesterday. It was 16. But Von Bell was exceptional. I can't remember. It was maybe Marshawn Lattimore covering Amari Cooper, but there was one, again, those sorts of things where you've got guys diving full stretch to swat balls away from receivers. The Saints just played a great game of team defense. They only managed to sack Prescott once, but there was enough pressure on him many times to force him into less than ideal throwing situations to get him to throw off platform. It was an impressive display from the Saints to limit this Cowboys offense, which has been dynamic and high scoring. For the Saints, in terms of getting to move the ball, Teddy Bridgewater went 23 of 30 for 193 yards, didn't throw a touchdown, had an interception. He was sacked 5 times. But he still made a couple of crucial throws and was able to get the ball to guys like Michael Thomas, who had 9 catches for 95 yards. The rushing game for the Saints, Alvin Kamara is an absolute jet. He is far and away one of the most exciting players to watch in the NFL. If you haven't seen any of his training videos, go on YouTube and look up Alvin Kamara medicine ball training, whatever it is. He does these balance drills where he's standing on medicine balls and balancing. He's doing squats on medicine balls. He's catching things that people are throwing at him while he's balancing on these medicine balls or yoga balls, whatever they are. His balance is impeccable. The amount of times where he gets tackled or someone gets an arm to his leg and he sort of trips and you think, oh, he's down. And he somehow manages to twist and contort his body, almost defying gravity, to hold himself up, to keep his feet, to push on and gain an extra, not even gaining just an extra 1 or 2 yards. He's gaining 4, 5, 6 yards after it looks like he's going to fall over. He is an absolute weapon for the Saints. I really hate to think what this team looks like without Kamara. I think he could be the biggest impact player on their team. Uh, I love Drew Brees. I think Drew Brees is an incredible quarterback, but Alvin Kamara is probably the most dynamic player on their team. And perhaps, I thought this last week against Seattle, I thought he was the match winner. He's the home run hitter in terms of just being able to pull out first downs when you need them. There were a couple of times last week against Seattle where, it might have been a third and long situation. You thought there's no way he's going to get this yardage here. And he did. He does. He finds a way to get out of trouble, get a first down. He's the match winner. If you're going to give away a match ball in this game, you give it to Alvin Kamara. He's an absolute physical freak, the things he can do. Just incredibly exhilarating to watch this guy play football. And the Saints are really lucky to have him on the field to help Bridgewater right the ship until Breeze is back to run the offense. I can't say enough about how good it was to watch Alvin Kamara play. For the Cowboys, look, as I said, Prescott was all right. He went 22 of 33 for 223 yards. He threw an interception. He was all right. And, probably even towards the end, he gave them a chance to win with a couple of big throws that were, took some onions, I guess. Some big throws over the top. He had a great long throw to set up the Hail Mary attempt at the end. I think he is the way forward for Dallas. Really, what they lacked today was not so much from Prescott, it was from Elliott. They stopped, what was essentially Dallas. There's a lot of talk that the offense in Dallas runs through Ezekiel Elliott. And if anything, today is evidence of that. They stopped Elliott, and the Cowboys couldn't get as much done on offense. I think it's kind of an obvious thing to say, but if there was any doubt in anyone's mind that the Dallas Cowboys offense goes through Elliott, today should have dispelled any of that doubt because the Saints really shut him down. If you can hold him, and that's a really hard thing to do. Most teams can't do it, but the Saints managed it today, last night rather, and won the game 12-10. If you had told me that the Saints will only score 12 points, I wouldn't have believed you that they would win the game. But that effort to stop the Dallas running game, to close the receivers down in space, to prevent big yard after the catch plays in the passing game for the Cowboys, really went a long way to helping them win this game. And when you've got Alvin Kamara, you're always going to be in with a chance. So the Saints walk away with a 12-10 victory to go 3-1 at the top of their division. The Cowboys still at the top of their division at 3-1. Next week, those teams, the Saints play the Buccaneers. Bit of a danger game for the Saints. I think they'll be glad that it's in their stadium. This Bucs team went and destroyed the Rams defense today. They put up 55 points today, and granted, some of those were from, offensive turnovers and that sort of thing by the Rams. But this Bucs team can score, which has never really been a problem for them. It's been on the other side of the ball. But they outblasted the Rams 55-40. You don't want to get into a shootout. I don't think the Saints have the weapons at this in the passing game in terms of. I wouldn't want to be relying on Teddy Bridgewater to out-duel the Buccaneers. You want a big defensive effort. You want to be able to keep the Buccaneers around that 20 points, 21 points, 3 touchdowns at most. If this starts to blow out to a 30, 35 sort of touchdown game, 35 touchdowns would be a bit much. 35 points, it could be a danger game for the Saints, but we'll see. I've got faith in their scheming and their defense that they can get the job done, particularly at home. It might be one of those Jameis Winston 1 touchdown, 4 interception kind of days. And the other thing you could do is maybe put Taysom Hill in there for a few snaps. I think he's got a stronger arm than Teddy Bridgewater, a bit more dynamic. I'm not saying get rid of Teddy, but this could be a game where you need some big passes downfield. Just roll old Taysom Hill through there. He's connected on a few big passes before. We've seen. That'll be an interesting matchup. And then for the Cowboys now, who do the Cowboys play? They play the Packers down in Dallas. That'll be an interesting game. Obviously, Aaron Rodgers can do Aaron Rodgers things, but there were some signs on the Friday night game that there are still some ways you can score points on this Packers defense. So we'll see what happens down in Arlington. But that's where it is. These two teams, the Saints get the Buccaneers down in the Superdome, and the Cowboys get to go play home against the Green Bay Packers. Just to quickly run through the rest of the results from Week 4 for you. So there were a couple of games of note outside of these. I thought that the Kansas City Chiefs winning 34-30 on the road in Detroit showed some really good signs, even though Patrick Mahomes, a lot of people are thinking the sky is falling down because he didn't throw for a touchdown. Probably had, one of his leanest games. He still threw for 300 whatever yards. I think that's a great sign. I think that's a great win for Kansas. It shows that they don't need Mahomes to throw touchdowns for them to win. I think they found other ways to get the job done. And as we were saying earlier about the Patriots, that's sort of the mark of a great team. You have to find other ways to win. And that's what they did, 34-30 on the road to Detroit. We talked about the Buccaneers blasting the Rams, 55-40. Some concerns maybe for that Rams team. Jared Goff threw a bunch of interceptions. They asked him in the end, he threw 68 times. I don't think that's the blueprint for success for the Rams to throw 68 times. Just a thought. So they go down 55-40 to the Rams, to the Buccaneers. The Browns get a 40-25 win over the Ravens to go equal first in the division, 2-2. So after a sort of turbulent first month, the Browns end up at 500 at 2-2, even with the Ravens at 2-2, and the rest of their season can sort of set up from there. Other results. The Titans beat the Falcons. I'm jumping off the Falcons. I had faith in them at the start of the year that they could turn things around and contend in the NFC South. I think they stink and probably won't sniff that division title. We also had the Panthers beat the Texans 16-10. Kyle Allen now gets another win, a second win in his second start this season. Panthers, leaned on the defense a bit in that game, 16-10. The Texans, with the weapons they have on offense, you would have expected them to be able to put up more than 10 points, but there you go. So they lose 16-10. Both those teams now 2-2. The Raiders get their record to 2-2 with a 31-24 win in Indianapolis over the Colts. The Colts also go to 2-2. The Chargers kind of smacked the Dolphins 30-10. The Chargers now 2-2. The old fish smelling Dolphins, who stink maybe worse than any other team in the NFL at the moment, go to 0-4. Josh Rosen didn't look too bad in the first sort of part of that game, but they faded late to lose 30-10. The Redskins flip and flop their way to 0-4, losing 24-3 to the Giants, who go to 2-2. Dwayne Haskins ended up coming on to replace Case Keenum in the second part of that Redskins game. Haskins didn't do much, threw 3 interceptions. Obviously, it's his first start in the NFL, but all the talk was that he wasn't ready to start, and that game would do nothing to disprove that. The Seahawks go to 3-1, beating the Cardinals 27-10 in Arizona. The Cardinals now no wins, 3 losses, and a tie. And finally, the Jaguars. The Gardner Minshew show rolls on, getting a field goal at the end of the game to win in Denver against the Broncos, 26-24. The Broncos now 0-4. The Jaguars 2-2. Like I think every other team in the AFC South, it's the most 2-2 division in the NFL. And you know the Broncos, Vic Fangio, might be sweating a bit under the collar there for a guy who was meant to make what was a good defense better. Hasn't really materialised. Not many sacks for the Broncos, if any, so far through 4 weeks. And you've got guys like Von Miller and Chubb playing for you. The Jaguars are looking a little bit frisky with Minshew at quarterback. The mighty mustache getting things done. Just quickly before we head off, we'll run through the Gridiron Victoria results for the week. The Geelong Buccaneers defeated the Sharks 7-0. It was a forfeit in the end from the Sharks. The Warriors 60 defeated the Raiders 0. Halftime forfeit due to injuries. This stuff happens, particularly in all country sports, in all sports. I guess where, numbers are hard to come by unless you're AFL football. I've played a lot of soccer when I was a teenager, and the reality is that if you're in a niche sport in Australia, sometimes you're going to struggle for numbers. But if you want to play Gridiron, I would strongly recommend getting involved with a team locally. I have considered it and still considering it. I've got to drive 2 hours to be involved in a team. But it's something I would definitely consider in future. And if you're in the Melbourne sort of area or out Ballarat, Bendigo, Geelong, they all have teams. Get involved because it's a really fun sport. Moving on, the Royals defeated the Dragons 22-8. We had the Predators defeat the Falcons 66-16. The Barbarians defeated the Silverbacks 28-6, and the Crusaders defeated the Rangers 14-3. I'm wanting to do more coverage of the Victorian Gridiron. I think it's really good to promote our local game. Obviously, a lot of us who have come to American football do so because of the NFL, love watching the NFL. But I think it's really important that we try and make a space to promote our own game, to promote Gridiron in Australia. So I'm looking forward to doing that in the future. But those results will do for this week. We'll wrap up now. I'm off to watch the Steelers play the Bengals. Big must-win game for the Steelers. If they want to try and stay in touch with the Ravens and the Browns, they're going to need this win at home against Cincinnati. If they don't do the business today, they move to 0-4. Season pretty much done-ski. So we'll see what Mason Rudolph and James Conner and co can produce for the Steelers. But that'll have to do us for now on the Jake Bowtell Football Experience, the JBFE. Really appreciate you watching. You've been great. I've been reasonable. We'll see you next time.